Dr. Venn moved through the vast chamber with practiced care. His 6 legs carried him smoothly across the polished floor, while his delicate antennae twitched at every temperature change. The archive of lost civilizations stretched before him like a cathedral of memory, filled with artifacts from species that no longer existed. Today, he was cataloging Section 7, the Sol 3 collection. Each tablet rested in its own suspension field, glowing faintly blue. There were exactly 10,000 of them. Dr. Venn had counted twice. They came in different sizes, some as small as his foreclaw, others taller than his body. The materials varied too. Stone, metal, ceramic, and substances his analyzers could not identify. But the most frustrating thing was the symbols. Dr. Venn adjusted his optical enhancers and peered at the nearest tablet. Strange markings covered its surface. They looked almost like writing, but they made no sense. His translation matrix hummed quietly, processing the patterns for the 1,000th time. Translation failed. Insufficient linguistic data. The same message he had seen for 300 years. "I do not understand you," Dr. Venn whispered to the tablet. "Why can no one understand you?" He had been chief archivist for 2 centuries. In that time, he had decoded the last writings of 47 extinct species. He had reconstructed dead languages from fragments. He had even translated the mathematical poetry of the silicon-based crystalline minds. But these tablets defeated him. Every expert in the galaxy had tried. The linguistic AIs from the core worlds analyzed them for decades. The telepathic readers from Sion Prime attempted direct mental contact. The ancient scholars of the Eternal Library compared them against 10 million known writing systems. Nothing worked. The tablets seemed to change meaning depending on how you looked at them. A symbol that appeared to mean one thing in morning light meant something different in evening. Patterns that looked like mathematics suddenly seemed like art. Texts that read horizontally also read vertically, and somehow both readings felt correct but contradicted each other. It was maddening. Dr. Venn opened his datapad and began his daily report. Day 109,842 of Sol 3 collection study. No progress on translation. Tablets remain impenetrable to all known methods. Recommend continued preservation and, his communicator chirped. Chief Archivist Venn, said a voice. It was Administrator Kess from the Council of Preservation. Please report to conference chamber immediately. Priority 1. Dr. Venn's antennae flattened in concern. Priority 1 meant something serious. He took one last look at the tablets and hurried toward the chamber. The conference chamber held representatives from 12 species. They sat in their specialized environments. Water tanks for the aquatic Delph. Low-gravity fields for the floating arids. Heated platforms for the cold-blooded Vryn. Administrator Kess, a tall being made of living crystal, pulsed with agitated colors. Dr. Venn, Kess said, we have a situation. It concerns your collection. The Sol 3 artifacts. Has something happened to them? Dr. Venn asked quickly. No, something has happened to Sol 3 itself. Kess gestured, and a holographic display appeared. It showed a star system. The third planet glowed green and blue. Earth. The origin world of the artifacts. Dr. Venn stared. But Earth is sealed. It has been sealed for 300 years. Correct, said Ambassador Kree. A bird-like corvid with glossy black feathers. We placed it under protective quarantine after our scout ships detected massive warfare. Nuclear weapons. Biological agents. Environmental collapse. We assumed the species destroyed itself. That is why we sent the preservation drones, added Kess, to collect what remained before the planet became completely uninhabitable. The drones gathered these tablets and brought them here. We catalogued the species as extinct. Case closed. Dr. Venn felt confused. Then why are we discussing this now? The holographic display changed. It showed a spacecraft. The design was unusual, angular, and practical, covered in markings that looked disturbingly familiar. Because, Kess said slowly, 3 days ago, this ship appeared at our outer beacon. It came from Earth. It is requesting permission to dock at Archive Station. The chamber fell silent. Impossible, whispered someone. The readings are confirmed, Kess continued. There are 15 life forms aboard. They call themselves humans. They say they are from Earth. They say their species survived. Dr. Ven's mind raced. The tablets, the warning signs they had detected 300 years ago. Everyone assumed the worst had happened. But if humans survived, what do they want? Asked Ambassador Kree suspiciously. They detected our archive beacon, Kess explained. They say they are explorers and scholars. They wish to share knowledge and learn about the galaxy. They specifically requested to visit the Archive of Lost Civilizations. Absolutely not, Kree said firmly. A species that nearly destroyed itself with war? A species so violent we had to quarantine their entire planet? We cannot allow them here. They passed all our security scans. Kess replied. Their weapons are minimal for asteroid defense only. Their biological signatures show no diseases. They appear peaceful. Appearing peaceful and being peaceful are different things, Kree argued. I vote we deny their request. I disagree, said Dr. Ven quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Those tablets have puzzled us for 3 centuries. Dr. Ven continued. Every expert failed to translate them. But now the beings who created them are here. Alive. Perhaps they can finally explain what the tablets mean. Kess pulsed, thoughtful yellow. An interesting point. It could be dangerous, Kree warned. Knowledge is always worth some risk, Dr. Ven said. That is why this archive exists. To preserve and understand. The council debated for hours. Finally, they voted. 8-4 in favor of allowing the human ship to dock. But, Kess added, they will be escorted at all times. Only one human may enter the archive proper. And Dr. Ven? You will be personally responsible for their supervision. Dr. Ven agreed immediately. 2 days later, he stood in the docking bay, watching the human ship settle onto its pad. The airlock opened with a hiss. A figure emerged. She was small compared to Dr. Ven, only reaching the height of his thorax. She had smooth skin the color of sand, dark hair pulled back, and 2 eyes that looked around with obvious curiosity. She wore simple clothing with many pockets, and carried a data device similar to his own. Hello, she said. And her translator rendered it in perfect galactic standard. I am Dr. Sarah Chen, linguist and cultural historian. Thank you for allowing me to visit. I am Dr. Ven, chief archivist, he replied. Welcome to Archive Station. I understand you wish to view our collection? Specifically the Sol 3 collection, Sarah said. Your beacon mentioned artifacts from Earth. I need to see them. There was something urgent in her voice. Dr. Ven led her through the station, explaining the archive's purpose as they walked. Sarah listened carefully, asking intelligent questions. Finally, they reached Section 7. Dr. Ven opened the massive door. Here we are. 10,000 tablets. We recovered them from your planet 300 years ago. We believed your species extinct. We have attempted to translate them, but... He stopped. Sarah had frozen in place. Her face had gone pale. Her eyes moved across the tablets, widening with each one she saw. Dr. Chen? Dr. Ven asked. Are you well? Sarah walked forward slowly, like someone in a dream. She stopped in front of the nearest tablet. Her hand reached out but did not touch the suspension field. Her lips moved silently, reading the symbols. Oh no, she whispered. Oh no, you found them. You found the warnings. Dr. Ven's antennae perked up. Warnings? You can read these? Sarah turned to face him. Her eyes were bright with emotion he could not quite identify. Fear? Sadness? Something else? Of course I can read them, she said quietly. Every human can. These aren't treasures, Dr. Ven. These aren't art or history books. She looked back at the vast collection of tablets. These are humanity's greatest failures. Every mistake we ever made, every disaster we caused, Every lesson we learned the hard way. She touched her translator to adjust it, making sure he understood perfectly. You asked what they are, Sarah said. They're warnings. Warnings we made. Warnings we kept. Warnings we sent into space hoping anyone would learn from our mistakes. Dr. Venn felt his world shifting. 300 years of mystery, about to be solved. But something in Sarah's expression told him the answer would not bring him comfort. Tell me everything, he said. Sarah nodded slowly. I will. But I should warn you, Dr. Venn. Once you understand what these tablets really are, you will never see humanity the same way again. Sarah stood before the tablets, her hand trembling slightly as she gestured toward the nearest one. Dr. Venn watched her carefully, his antenna twitching with curiosity and concern. This one, Sarah said, pointing to a clay tablet covered in wedge-shaped marks, is written in cuneiform. It's from ancient Mesopotamia, about 4,000 years old by your calendar. It tells the story of a great flood that destroyed almost everything. Dr. Venn adjusted his optical enhancers. A flood? A natural disaster? Yes and no, Sarah replied. The story says the gods sent the flood because humans became too proud, too violent. But it's really a warning about hubris. About thinking we're more powerful than nature. About ignoring the signs of danger until it's too late. She moved to the next tablet, this one made of stone with carved symbols. This is from Egypt. It describes a time when the Nile River failed to flood for 7 years. Famine came. People suffered. The warning here is about preparing for bad times during good times, about saving resources instead of wasting them. Dr. Venn's translator worked quickly to process her words. But these are just stories. Historical records. Why call them warnings? Sarah turned to face him. Her expression was serious. Because we don't just record what happened, Dr. Venn. We record what we learned. Every human child studies these stories. We teach them in schools. We discuss them in homes. We never let ourselves forget the lessons. She walked deeper into the collection, her eyes scanning the tablets with growing emotion. Dr. Venn followed, his curiosity overwhelming his caution. Here. Sarah stopped at a metal tablet with strange symbols. This is from Japan. Hiroshima. 1945, by our old calendar. Do you know what this records? No, Dr. Venn admitted. Sarah's voice dropped to almost a whisper. This marks the first time humans used atomic weapons against other humans. 2 cities destroyed in moments. Hundreds of thousands dead. Generations affected by radiation. Dr. Venn's legs went stiff. You recorded your own act of mass destruction? Yes, Sarah said firmly. We recorded it. We preserved it. We made sure every generation would know what we did. The pain we caused. The lives we ended. We carved it into metal so it would last forever. She touched her data device, and a holographic image appeared. It showed the tablet's symbols, translated into Galactic Standard. But there was something else: emotional data, contextual information, historical analysis. The tablet doesn't just describe the event, Sarah explained. It describes the guilt, the horror, the promise we made to ourselves. Never again. We created international laws after this. We built organizations to prevent it from happening again. But we kept this warning. Because laws can be forgotten. Promises can be broken. Only shame remembered can truly protect us. Dr. Venn felt deeply uncomfortable. You preserved your shame? Your failure? This is unusual. Most species hide their mistakes. They celebrate only victories. And that's why most species eventually destroy themselves, Sarah said quietly. We almost did too. Many times. But we learned something important. She gestured at all the tablets around them. Every civilization makes mistakes. The difference is whether you remember them or repeat them. Ambassador Kree's voice suddenly crackled through Dr. Venn's communicator. Dr. Venn, report immediately. The council needs to hear this. Within an hour, Sarah stood before the full Council of Preservation. The chamber was packed with representatives from dozens of species, all watching her with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity. Administrator Kess pulsed with demanding orange colors. Dr. Chen, you claim these tablets are warnings. Explain exactly what you mean. Sarah took a deep breath. Throughout human history, we faced many catastrophes. Wars, plagues, famines, environmental disasters. Many were natural, but many we caused ourselves. Each time, we had a choice. Forget the pain and move forward, or remember the lesson and change. She activated her data device, projecting images of various tablets. We chose to remember. We created monuments, wrote books, carved stones, built museums. But when we developed space technology, we realized something important. If we destroyed ourselves, and we came very close several times, all those lessons would die with us. So you sent them into space? Asked a delegate from the Delph species, her aquatic voice bubbling through her translator. Yes, Sarah confirmed. During our darkest period, about 350 years ago, we faced multiple crises at once. Climate change, resource wars, a pandemic, political collapse. Many believed humanity would not survive. So our scientists and historians worked together on a project. They gathered copies of our most important warnings, the mistakes that nearly destroyed us, and launched them into space. Why? Cree demanded. If you believed you were dying, why burden the galaxy with your failures? Sarah met his eyes steadily. Because we hoped someone else would find them. We hoped that maybe, somewhere in the galaxy, another species might be facing similar challenges, and maybe, just maybe, our mistakes could save them from making the same ones. The chamber fell silent. Dr. Venn felt something stirring inside him, an emotion he couldn't quite name. But you survived, Kess observed. Obviously, since you are here. Barely, Sarah said. Those warnings we sent into space? We kept copies on Earth too. We studied them. We taught them to our children. We changed our behavior based on the lessons. It took generations, but we learned. We adapted. We survived because we refused to forget our mistakes. A delegate from the silicon-based Ziv species spoke up. This is fascinating, but there is something I do not understand. These tablets, they resist our translation technology. They confuse our AIs. Why? Sarah smiled slightly. Because they were never meant to be just data. They're not simple information. Each tablet contains context, emotion, cultural meaning. They're designed to be understood with both logic and feeling. That's why your machines couldn't translate them. Machines process information. These tablets require understanding. She walked to a large tablet near the center of the collection. May I demonstrate? Kess pulsed agreement. Sarah placed both hands near the tablet's suspension field. She closed her eyes and spoke softly. Authorization. Human genetic signature confirmed. Cultural context. Active. Memorial protocol. Engaged. The tablet began to glow. Suddenly, the entire chamber filled with holographic images. Dr. Venn gasped as he found himself standing in what appeared to be an ancient human city. Buildings crumbled around him. People screamed. Fire raged in the distance. This is Pompeii, Sarah's voice echoed. A Roman city destroyed by a volcanic eruption in 79 AD. Nearly 2,000 people died because they ignored the warning signs. The mountain shook for days before it erupted. But people didn't leave. They thought they were safe. The scene shifted. Now Dr. Venn saw survivors digging through ash, searching for loved ones. He felt their grief, their guilt for not leaving when they had the chance. The lesson, Sarah continued, isn't just that volcanoes are dangerous. The lesson is that ignoring warnings kills. That assuming safety when danger approaches is fatal. That listening to experts and respecting nature's power can save lives. The hologram faded. The chamber returned to normal. But every delegate looked shaken by what they had experienced. These tablets, Sarah said, are interactive memories. They don't just tell you what happened. They make you feel it. They make you understand why it matters. That's why humans can read them and machines cannot. Dr. Ven's voice shook slightly. How many of these contain such experiences? All of them, Sarah answered. 10,000 mistakes. 10,000 lessons. 10,000 warnings that cost us dearly to learn. Ambassador Kree stood abruptly. This proves my point. Humans are dangerous. A species that needed 10,000 warnings? That made so many terrible mistakes? We should never have let them leave their planet. You're absolutely right, Sarah said calmly. Everyone stared at her in surprise. We are dangerous, Sarah continued. We're dangerous because we remember our capacity for harm. We're dangerous because we know exactly what we're capable of when we forget these lessons, but that's also why we're still alive. She gestured at all the delegates. How many of your species preserve your failures? How many teach your children about the wars you lost, the mistakes you made, the people you hurt? How many of you carve your shame into permanent records? Silence filled the chamber. That's what I thought, Sarah said softly. Most species hide their failures. They celebrate only victories. They forget the hard lessons. And eventually, they repeat the same mistakes, until those mistakes destroy them. She looked at each delegate in turn. We survived because we remembered. We thrived because we learned. We reached the stars because we refused to forget the cost of our journey. Dr. Ven felt his understanding shifting. 300 years he had studied these tablets, seeing them as mysterious artifacts from a dead world. Now he understood they were something far more important. They were proof that remembering failure was humanity's greatest strength. Administrator Kess pulsed with thoughtful blue. Dr. Chen, these tablets contain quantum data signatures we did not detect before. They're activating in your presence. What else can they do? Sarah hesitated. There's more. Much more. But I need to know, are you ready to truly understand humanity? Because once you see the full scope of what we've learned, you can never see us the same way again. Before anyone could answer, alarms blared throughout Archive Station. Red lights flashed. Emergency protocols activated. A technician shouted, "Unidentified fleet approaching. Multiple warships. They're not responding to hails." On the main display, dozens of sleek, aggressive-looking vessels appeared. They bore the markings of the Vrin Armada, a species known for their military power and territorial disputes. And they were heading straight for the archive. The alarms continued blaring throughout Archive Station. Dr. Ven rushed to the main display, his antennae flat against his head in alarm. Sarah followed close behind, her face tense but calm. How many ships? Administrator Kess demanded, pulsing urgent red. 37 warships, the technician reported. Vrin military configuration. They're demanding immediate access to the archive. Ambassador Kree's feathers ruffled in agitation. The Vrin? What do they want here? This is neutral territory. No weapons. No military conflicts allowed. End of Vrin 2. End of Vrin 2. The communications console crackled to life. A harsh, reptilian voice filled the chamber. This is Commander Sharek of the Vrin Armada. We require access to your weapons archives immediately. We are in the middle of a civil war. We need advanced technology to end this conflict. You will grant us entry, or we will take it by force. Kess pulsed pale yellow with fear. Commander Sharek, this is a place of preservation and learning. We have no weapons. We store only historical artifacts. You lie, Sharek hissed. Our intelligence says you have technology from 1,000 dead civilizations. Weapons, defenses, battle strategies. We will have them. Dr. Ven looked at Sarah. She stood perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the display showing the Vrin fleet. Her expression was unreadable. We have no defenses, Kess admitted to the council quietly. Archive Station was built for research, not warfare. If they attack, we cannot stop them. Evacuate, Kree suggested. Get everyone to escape pods. There is not enough time, the technician said grimly. They will be in weapons range in 10 minutes. Sarah stepped forward suddenly. Let me talk to them. Everyone turned to stare at her. You? Kree said incredulously. You are human. They do not even know your species exists. How could you possibly help? Because, Sarah said calmly, I understand what they're going through. And I can show them something that might change their minds. Kess pulsed uncertain orange. What do you mean? The tablets, Sarah explained quickly. They're not just warnings for humans. They're warnings for anyone. Any species. Any civilization. The Vryn are fighting a civil war. We've had dozens of those. They want weapons to end it permanently? We tried that too. And we learned why it never works. Dr. Ven's mind raced. It was a huge risk. But they had no other options. Do it, he said. Kess hesitated only a moment before pulsing agreement. Open the channel. Sarah stood before the communications console. Her small human frame looked fragile compared to the massive warships on the display. But her voice was steady and strong. Commander Shirak, my name is Dr. Sarah Chen. I am human, from Earth. I have something that might interest you more than weapons. I have knowledge, real knowledge about war and what it costs. There was a long pause. Then Shirak's voice returned, curious despite its harshness. Human? We have no records of this species. Why should we listen to you? Because my species has fought more wars than I can count, Sarah said bluntly. Civil wars. World wars. Wars that nearly destroyed our entire planet. We developed weapons so terrible that using them would have ended all life on Earth. And we came very close to using them. Another pause. Then your species is warrior-like. Good. You understand strength. Give us your weapons technology and we will leave peacefully. I will give you something better than weapons, Sarah replied. I will show you what happens when you win a war using the most powerful weapons you have. I will show you the cost of total victory. And then you can decide if that is what you really want. Why would we care about costs? Shirak demanded. War always has costs. That is the nature of conflict. Some costs destroy the winner, along with the loser, Sarah said quietly. Come aboard. Experience one of our warnings. Just one. If you still want weapons after that, we can discuss it. But I think you will change your mind. The channel went silent for a full minute. Dr. Ven held his breath. Finally, Shirak spoke again. Very well, I will come aboard with 2 guards. But if this is a trick, human, we will destroy your station. No tricks, Sarah promised. Just truth. 20 minutes later, Commander Shirak stood in Section 7 of the archive. He was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, covered in thick scales that gleamed like polished bronze. His eyes were yellow with vertical pupils, and his clawed hands rested on the ceremonial weapons at his belt. 2 equally large Vryn guards flanked him, their postures tense and ready for combat. Dr. Ven noticed that Sarah seemed tiny next to them, but she showed no fear. These are the tablets, she said, gesturing at the vast collection. Each one contains a lesson humanity learned through suffering, through mistakes, through wars we wish we had never fought. Shirak looked around dismissively. Old stones with markings. This is your great knowledge? These stones, Sarah said, contain experiences. Not just information. Not just data. They will let you feel what happened. Live through it as if you were there. Are you brave enough to experience one? Shirak's scales rippled a sign of irritation among his species. Vryn, fear nothing. Show me. Sarah led them to a specific tablet. It was made of dark metal, etched with symbols that seemed to absorb light. Dr. Ven recognized it from her earlier demonstration. The Hiroshima tablet. This records an event from human history, Sarah explained. A war between 2 groups of nations. It lasted 6 years. Millions died. Near the end, one side developed a new weapon, an atomic bomb. They used it on 2 cities belonging to the other side. The war ended immediately after. Shirak leaned forward with interest. A weapon that ends wars immediately? This is exactly what we need. Perhaps, Sarah said. But first, experience what that weapon actually does, feel what it costs. She activated the tablet. The chamber dissolved around them. Suddenly, Dr. Ven found himself standing on a street in an ancient human city. The sun shone brightly. People walked past, men, women, children going about their daily lives. Some looked worried, but life continued. Then came the flash. Dr. Ven experienced the blinding light that turned shadows into permanent marks on walls. He felt the heat that vaporized humans instantly, leaving nothing but silhouettes burned into concrete. He heard the screams of those who survived the initial blast but were dying from burns that covered their entire bodies. He witnessed children crying for parents who no longer existed. He saw doctors trying desperately to help patients when they had no medicine, no supplies, no hope. The vision moved forward in time. Days passed. Weeks. Years. He saw the survivors scarred, sick, dying slowly from radiation poisoning. He saw babies born with terrible deformities because their parents had been exposed. He saw generations affected by a single weapon used for just a few seconds, and through it all, he felt the emotions of the humans who had made this choice. Their initial pride in their powerful weapon. Then their growing horror, as they understood what they had truly done. The guilt that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The vision ended. The chamber returned to normal. Dr. Ven's legs trembled. Several council members made sounds of distress. One of the Vryn guards had fallen to his knees, his scales pale with shock. Commander Shirok stood perfectly still, his yellow eyes wide and unblinking. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. That weapon ended the war in days. Your enemy would surrender immediately if you had something like it. You would win totally and completely. Sharek's voice came out as a hoarse whisper. Those were children. Civilians. They were not soldiers. War does not care, Sarah said. When you use weapons of total destruction, everyone suffers. The guilty and the innocent. Your enemies and your own people. The land itself becomes poisoned for generations. But you won, Sharek said, confusion and horror mixing in his voice. Your side was victorious. Why do you mourn this victory? Why preserve this shame? Sarah walked closer to the towering Vryn commander. She looked up at him without fear. Because we learned that some victories are not worth their cost. Because we realized that destroying your enemy completely means destroying part of yourself. Because we understood that true strength is not in having the power to destroy, but in having the wisdom to choose not to. She gestured at the tablet. After this event, humanity created new laws. International agreements. Organizations dedicated to preventing this from ever happening again. We banned certain weapons. We established rules for war. We worked to resolve conflicts through negotiation instead of total destruction. Did it work? Shirok asked quietly. Not always, Sarah admitted honestly. We still had wars. We still made mistakes. But we never used weapons like that again. And slowly, over generations, we learned to fight less and talk more. We learned that former enemies can become allies, that differences can be resolved without destroying each other. Shirok looked at the tablet again, then at Sarah. You said there are 10,000 of these tablets. 10,000 lessons. Yes, Sarah confirmed. Show me more, Shirok said suddenly. Show me your civil wars. I need to see if you faced what we are facing now. Sarah nodded and led them to another section. For the next 2 hours, she showed Commander Shirok tablet after tablet. The American Civil War, the Rwandan conflict, the breakup of Yugoslavia, the sectarian violence in Ireland. Each one showed different groups of humans fighting other humans, believing their cause was righteous, their methods justified, and each one showed the aftermath, the broken families, the destroyed cities, the generations of hatred that continued long after the fighting stopped. Dr. Ven watched Shirok's expression change with each vision. The commander's scales shifted through colors that Dr. Ven's database identified as deep emotional responses, confusion, horror, shame, and finally, something like grief. When the last vision ended, Sharak stood silently for a long moment. His guards waited, equally shaken by what they had witnessed. "How?" Sharak finally asked. "How did you stop? How did you move from this," he gestured at the tablets, "to a unified species that travels the stars together?" Sarah smiled sadly. "It took a long time. Centuries. And it started with people remembering these lessons, teaching them to their children, refusing to let hatred be passed down through generations. We had to choose, repeat the cycle forever, or break it by remembering why the cycle was terrible in the first place." Sharak looked at his guards. Something passed between them, a silent communication Dr. Venn could not interpret. Then Sharak turned back to Sarah. "My people are destroying each other," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Two factions, both believing they are right, both willing to do anything to win. I came here seeking weapons to end it quickly. But now you understand that ending it quickly with overwhelming force would only create new wounds." Sarah finished gently. "Wounds that would last for generations." Sharak's scales rippled slowly. Resignation, Dr. Venn's database suggested. "What should I do instead?" "That is not for me to decide," Sarah said. "But I can offer you copies of these tablets. Lessons from every civil war humanity ever fought. The mistakes we made. The solutions that worked. The approaches that failed. You can share them with both sides of your conflict. Let them experience what total war truly means. Let them see where this path leads." "And if they still choose to fight?" Sharak asked. "Then at least they will make that choice with full understanding of the cost," Sarah replied. "But in our experience, once people truly understand the cost, most choose to find another way." Commander Sharak stood tall. His scales had returned to their normal bronze color. But something in his posture had changed. He looked less like a warrior seeking victory, and more like a leader bearing a heavy burden. "I will take your offer," he said formally. "I will share these warnings with my people. Both sides. All factions." He paused. "But I have one question. Why? Why help us? You do not know us. Our war is not your concern." Sarah's answer was simple and direct. "Because humanity nearly destroyed itself learning these lessons. We paid a terrible price for this knowledge. The least we can do is share it freely, so others do not have to suffer the same way we did." Commander Sharak's decision to take the tablets created immediate chaos. Within hours of his fleet's departure from Archive Station, news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. A human species had appeared. They possessed knowledge from 10,000 failures. They had changed a Vryn commander's mind without firing a single shot. Dr. Venn had not slept in 2 days. His communication console never stopped chirping. Species from every corner of the galaxy were requesting information, demanding access, asking questions. Sarah sat in his office, looking tired but alert. She drank something called coffee from a thermos she had brought from her ship. The smell was strange to Dr. Venn's antennae, but she seemed to need it. "This is getting out of control," Dr. Venn said, looking at the long list of incoming requests. 73 different species want to visit. They all want to see the tablets. Some are offering payment. Others are making threats. And the council does not know what to do. Sarah sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "What do you think we should do?" "Me?" Dr. Venn's antennae twitched in surprise. "I am just an archivist. This is a matter for the council to decide." "You have studied these tablets for 300 years, Sarah pointed out. "You dedicated your life to understanding them. Your opinion matters." Dr. Venn considered this. He looked at his data pad, scrolling through the requests. Most were genuine species, facing problems similar to humanity's past, but some were concerning. "There is one request that worries me," he admitted. "From the Carthon Collective. They are asking about biological warfare information. They claim it is for defensive purposes only. But their history suggests otherwise." Sarah's expression grew serious. "Show me." Dr. Venn pulled up the file. The Carthons were an insectoid species, highly intelligent but extremely territorial. They had recently discovered that a neighboring species was expanding into star systems the Carthons considered their rightful territory. They say they want to learn from human mistakes with biological weapons, Dr. Venn explained, to avoid making the same errors. Sarah read the request carefully. This is exactly what I was afraid of. The tablets were meant to prevent suffering, not enable it. We need rules, guidelines for who can access what information and under what circumstances. But who decides that? Dr. Venn asked. Who has the right to judge which species deserves knowledge and which does not? Before Sarah could answer, Administrator Kess entered the office, pulsing agitated orange. Emergency session. Council chamber. Now, Ambassador Kree is demanding that the human tablets be sealed immediately. They hurried to the chamber. It was packed with delegates, all talking at once. The noise level was overwhelming. Kree stood at the center podium, his black feathers puffed up with anger. This has gone too far. 3 days ago, we had a quiet research station. Now, we are the center of galactic attention. Species are threatening war if they do not get access to human knowledge. Others are offering ridiculous amounts of credits. This is chaos. Calm yourself, Ambassador, Kess said, trying to restore order. We are here to discuss solutions, not panic. My solution is simple, Kree snapped. Seal Section 7. Restrict all access to human tablets. Return things to how they were before the humans arrived. Sarah stood up. That would be a mistake. You have no authority here, human, Kree said coldly. This is a galactic matter. Your species just arrived. You do not understand our politics, our history, our problems. You are right, Sarah said calmly. I do not understand all of that. But I understand something else. I understand what happens when you hide knowledge. When you restrict information. When you decide that some people deserve to learn and others do not. She walked to the center of the chamber. Humanity tried that approach many times throughout our history. Powerful groups controlled knowledge. They decided who could read, who could learn, who could access information, and every single time, it led to corruption, to abuse of power, to revolution and violence. That is your species' problem, Kree argued. Not ours. Is it? Sarah challenged. Then, tell me, Ambassador Kree, how did your species, the Corvids, achieve spaceflight? Kree's feathers ruffled defensively. Through scientific advancement. Through proper research and development. And how many Corvid scientists died because their government hid safety information from them? Sarah asked directly. How many explosions could have been prevented if knowledge was shared freely instead of controlled by a select few? The chamber went silent. Dr. Venn checked his historical database quickly. He found the information a dark period in Corvid history, where their government had indeed restricted scientific knowledge. Hundreds had died in preventable accidents. Kree said nothing. Knowledge is dangerous, Sarah continued. I will not pretend otherwise. The tablets contain information about terrible things. Weapons, diseases, methods of causing harm. But hiding that information does not make anyone safer. It just means people repeat the same mistakes without understanding why they are mistakes. A delegate from the aquatic Delph species spoke up. But surely some restrictions are necessary? The Carthon request. For example, should we give them information about biological weapons when they might use it against their neighbors? That is a fair question, Sarah acknowledged. And I think the answer is not to restrict access, but to require context. The Carthons want information about biological weapons? Fine. Give them everything. Show them how humanity developed such weapons. Show them how we used them. Show them the millions who died. Show them the generations affected. Show them why we banned them and created international agreements to prevent their use. She looked around at all the delegates. Give them the complete lesson. Not just the technical details. Make them experience the full cost. Then let them decide if that is really the path they want to follow. Dr. Venn found himself nodding. It made sense. The tablets were not just technical manuals, they were moral lessons. The two could not be separated. A new voice spoke up. It was tech specialist Zeev, the silicon-based engineer who maintained the archive systems. There is another issue we must address. The tablets are activating in ways we did not anticipate. They are learning, adapting, growing. Everyone turned to look at Zeev. What do you mean, learning? Kes asked, pulsing concerned yellow. Zeev projected a holographic display. It showed complex data streams flowing between the tablets. When Dr. Chen activated the first tablet for Commander Shirak, something changed in the system. The tablets began communicating with each other, sharing data, creating new connections. They are forming a network. Is that dangerous? Someone asked nervously. I do not believe so, Zeev replied. But it is unexpected. The tablets are not merely storage devices. They are something more sophisticated. Almost like they are alive. Sarah stepped forward to examine the data. Her expression showed recognition. This was part of the original design, she said quietly. The scientists who created the tablets wanted them to be adaptive, to respond to the needs of whoever found them, to present the most relevant lessons based on the situation. You mean they are intelligent, Doctor? Ven asked in amazement. Not in the way we usually think of intelligence, Sarah explained. But yes, they have a kind of awareness. They can sense the emotional state of people nearby. They can detect conflicts, fears, questions, and they respond by highlighting the lessons most relevant to those specific situations. She turned to face the council. This is why sealing them away would not work. The tablets want to teach. That is their purpose. If you lock them away, you are fighting against their fundamental nature. Then what do you propose? Kes asked. Sarah took a deep breath. I propose we open the archive fully, make it available to any species that wants to learn, but with conditions. First, no one gets just the technical information. You must experience the full context, the suffering, the consequences, the lessons. Second, a human representative must be present for all viewings, to provide cultural context and answer questions. Third, any species accessing the tablets must agree to share what they learn with their own people. No individual hoarding of knowledge. That would require a significant human presence here, Kes observed. How many humans are on your ship? 15 on this ship, Sarah said. But when I report back to Earth, I know thousands will volunteer. We have historians, teachers, counselors, people dedicated to making sure these lessons are understood correctly. This is important to us. This is why we sent the tablets into space in the first place. Ambassador Kree stood again. I still believe this is dangerous. You are inviting chaos. Chaos is coming whether we invite it or not, Sarah replied. Word is already spreading. Species already know the tablets exist. You can either control how they are shared, or you can lose control entirely as people fight over access. Which would you prefer? The council debated for hours. Dr. Ven listened to arguments from all sides. Some agreed with Sarah. Others supported Kree's position. Many were uncertain. Finally, Kes called for a vote. All in favor of opening full access to the tablets under the conditions Dr. Chen specified? The vote was close. 8 in favor, 7 against. The motion passes, Kes announced. Section 7 will become the archive of remembered lessons. Access will be granted to all species under the specified conditions. Kree's feathers flattened in displeasure, but he said nothing. Sarah looked relieved but also tired. Thank you. I will contact Earth immediately and request additional personnel. As the council dispersed, Dr. Ven approached Sarah. You took a significant risk. This could still go wrong in many ways. I know, Sarah admitted. But hiding knowledge always goes wrong eventually. At least this way, we have a chance to guide how it is used. Dr. Ven's communicator chirped. He checked it and felt his antennae go stiff with alarm. Sarah, you need to see this. He showed her the message. It was from Commander Shirak. The message was short, but devastating. Returned home, shared tablets with both sides of conflict. Initial reactions positive. But hardliners on both sides saw tablets as proof they were right all along. They found lessons that supported their positions. Conflict escalating faster than before. Please advise. Situation critical. Sarah read the message twice. Her face went pale. Oh no. This is exactly what I feared. What do we do? Dr. Venn asked. Sarah's hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. We go there. We go to the Vryn homeworld. We show them what they are missing. We make them understand that you cannot cherry-pick lessons, you must learn all of them. That could be incredibly dangerous, Dr. Venn warned. You would be entering an active war zone. I know, Sarah said. But these are our warnings. Our responsibility. If people are misusing them, we have to correct that. We have to show them the complete truth, not just the parts they want to see. She looked at Dr. Venn directly. Will you come with me? I need someone who understands the archive, who can explain what these tablets truly mean. Dr. Venn's antennae twitched nervously. He had spent 300 years in the safety of the archive, cataloging artifacts from dead civilizations. Now he was being asked to enter a living conflict, to risk his life for the sake of understanding. But he thought about the tablets. About the lessons humanity had learned through so much pain. About the responsibility that came with knowledge. Yes, he said finally. The journey to the Vryn homeworld took 3 days. Sarah and Dr. Venn traveled aboard a diplomatic shuttle, escorted by 2 archive security ships. The closer they got, the more evidence they saw of the conflict. Debris fields floated in space, pieces of destroyed ships from both sides. Communication channels crackled with military orders and distress calls. Warning beacons flashed everywhere, marking dangerous zones. Dr. Venn watched the displays with growing anxiety. His antennae trembled constantly. I have never been in a war zone before, he admitted to Sarah. Neither have I, Sarah said quietly. Not like this. But humanity has been through this too many times. Maybe that experience can help. Maybe that experience can help. They received clearance to land at a neutral meeting facility on the largest moon. Commander Shirak met them at the landing pad, along with representatives from both warring factions. Shirak looked tired. His scales had lost their shine, and his movements were slower than before. Dr. Chen. Dr. Venn. Thank you for coming. The situation is worse than I described. He led them to a conference room. On one side sat 3 Vryn with red markings on their scales, the Crimson faction. On the other side sat 3 with blue markings, the Azure faction. Both groups looked at each other with barely controlled hostility. We shared the tablets as you suggested, Shirak explained. Both factions watched them. But instead of finding common ground, each side found justification for their position. A Crimson faction leader named Vrak spoke up angrily. The human tablets show that those who act decisively win wars. Hesitation leads to defeat. We must strike hard and fast. No, countered an Azure leader named Thesia. The tablets show that aggressive action causes unnecessary suffering. Diplomacy and patience are the true paths to victory. You both saw the same tablets, Sarah said carefully, but you reached opposite conclusions. How is that possible? Because we chose different examples, Vrak said. I studied human wars, where swift military actions saved lives by ending conflict quickly. And I studied wars where negotiation prevented disasters, Thesia added. Where patience stopped violence before it started. Sarah looked at Dr. Venn. He understood immediately this was the problem with knowledge. It could be used to support any position if you only chose the pieces that fit your beliefs. You are both right and both wrong, Sarah said. May I show you something? She pulled out a portable tablet display. One of the human tablets had been converted to digital format for transport. This is not from the original collection. This is something we created after we sent the warnings into space. We call it the synthesis tablet. It was meant to tie all the lessons together. She activated it. The holographic display filled the room with images not of any single event, but of patterns. Hundreds of human conflicts shown side by side, compared and analyzed. Look closely, Sarah instructed. See what actually determines whether swift action or patient negotiation works better. The images showed wars where quick military action had indeed ended conflict rapidly, but only when both sides were exhausted and ready for peace anyway. When one side still had hope of total victory, swift action just made them fight harder. Other images showed successful negotiations, but only when both sides had something to lose and something to gain. When one side had nothing to lose, negotiation failed. The lesson is not always be aggressive or always be patient, Sarah explained. The lesson is, understand your situation accurately and respond appropriately. Sometimes action is needed, sometimes patience is needed. Wisdom is knowing which applies to your specific circumstances. Vrock crossed his arms. So, you are saying there is no clear answer? No simple solution? Exactly, Sarah confirmed. That is why we have 10,000 tablets instead of one, because every situation is different, because simple answers to complex problems are usually wrong. But we need to make a decision, Thesia said desperately. Our people are dying every day. We cannot just study tablets forever while the war continues. Dr. Venn spoke up for the first time. Then perhaps that is your answer. The fact that you are both here, talking, instead of fighting, that itself is a choice. A choice to pause, to listen, to consider, Sarah nodded. Commander Sharak brought you both here, not to convince one side to surrender, but to find a path forward together. That is already progress. Sharak stepped forward. Dr. Chen, when you showed me the tablets at the archive, I experienced the suffering directly. I felt it, but when we shared copies with our people, they only saw the information. They did not feel the emotions. They analyzed the data without experiencing the pain. That is why the message was lost. Sarah's eyes widened. The tablets need the quantum activation protocols, the emotional resonance. Without that, they are just history lessons, not warnings. Can you activate them here? Sharak asked hopefully. Not with copies, Sarah said. The originals have the necessary quantum encoding. Copies only transfer the visual and audio data, not the emotional imprinting. She thought for a moment. But I can create a new experience. A live demonstration. If both factions are willing. What kind of demonstration? Vrock asked suspiciously. Let me tell you a story, Sarah said. Not from a tablet. From my own life. From my family's history. She sat down, and her voice took on a different quality, personal, intimate, painful. My great-great-grandmother was a soldier in one of Earth's last major wars. She fought bravely. She believed in her cause completely. She killed enemy soldiers. She watched friends die. She survived explosions and attacks, and when her side finally won after 5 years of fighting, she returned home as a hero. Sarah paused, gathering her emotions. She had 2 children. My great-grandfather was one of them. She tried to be a good mother, but the war had changed her. She had nightmares. She could not sleep without medication. Loud noises made her panic. She could not form close relationships because she had watched too many people die. One day, when my great-grandfather was 10 years old, he asked her a simple question. Was it worth it? She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, We won the war. We achieved our objectives. We stopped the enemy, but I lost something in that war that I can never get back. I lost the ability to feel safe, to trust, to love without fear. So you tell me, was it worth it? The room was silent. Both Crimson and Azure representatives listened intently. My great-grandfather carried that question his whole life, Sarah continued. He became a peace negotiator. He dedicated himself to preventing wars, not winning them. And when I was young, he told me something I have never forgotten. He said, War is sometimes necessary, but it should never be preferred. It should never be celebrated. And it should never be started unless every other option has truly, honestly failed. Sarah looked at both factions. I see young Vryn in military uniforms outside this building. Soldiers ready to fight, ready to die, ready to win. But have you asked them what they will lose even in victory? Have you considered the cost they will carry for the rest of their lives? Thessia's voice was quiet. My daughter is a fighter pilot. She is 19 years old. She has already flown 15 combat missions. Vrak looked down. My son commands a ground unit. Last week, his unit was ambushed. 3 of his soldiers died. He has not spoken to me since. He just stares at nothing. They are both paying the price already, Sarah said gently. And the war is not even finished. Imagine what they will carry if this continues for years. Imagine the peace they will never feel. The relationships they will struggle to maintain. The memories that will haunt them. Commander Shirak spoke with deep emotion. I have commanded warriors for 30 years. I have seen hundreds return from battle. The ones who die in combat, their suffering ends quickly, but the ones who survive and win, some of them never truly come home. Part of them stays in the battlefield forever. Dr. Venn added softly, I have cataloged artifacts from 47 extinct civilizations. Do you know what many of them have in common? They won their wars. They defeated their enemies. They achieved total victory. And then, they turned on themselves. Because winning had taught them to solve every problem with force, they forgot how to compromise, how to negotiate, how to coexist. So they destroyed themselves. The room fell into heavy silence. Finally, Vrak spoke. What are you suggesting? That we simply surrender? Accept defeat? No, Sarah said firmly. I am suggesting you both already lost something. Precious peace, stability, the safety of your children. Now you need to decide what matters more. Proving you were right, or stopping the loss from getting worse. Thessia looked at Vrak across the table. The Azure faction wants autonomy for our colonies. That is our core demand. Everything else is negotiable. Vrak hesitated, then replied slowly. The Crimson faction wants security guarantees. We fear separatist movements will weaken our defenses against external threats. That is our core concern. Then you do not actually need to destroy each other, Dr. Venn observed. You need a structure that provides both autonomy and security. That is a design problem, not a war problem. Sarah pulled up a display. Humanity has experimented with dozens of governmental structures, federal systems, confederations, commonwealth arrangements. Many were created specifically to solve the exact problem you face, how to give regions independence while maintaining collective security. She showed them examples. The Swiss Confederation, the European Union's evolution, the African Union's frameworks. Each one developed to balance local control with shared defense. These were not perfect solutions, Sarah admitted, but they worked well enough that people stopped fighting and started building. And over time, the systems improved because people were alive to improve them. For 3 hours, they talked. Not about victory or defeat, but about structures and possibilities. About what each side truly needed versus what they thought they needed. About compromises that might preserve both factions' core interests. Finally, as the moon's sun set outside the windows, Thessia and Vrak looked at each other. I cannot promise my faction will accept this, Thessia said carefully. But I will present these ideas. I will show them the human examples. I will ask them to consider a path besides endless war. As will I, Vrak agreed reluctantly. Though many in the Crimson faction see compromise as weakness. Then show them human history, Sarah suggested. Show them that humanity's strongest moments were not when we won wars, but when we had the courage to stop fighting and build something better. That is true strength. 3 weeks later, Dr. Venn stood in the archive with Sarah. They watched news broadcasts from the Vryn homeworld. The ceasefire had held. Negotiation teams were meeting daily. Progress was slow, but it was real. It might not last, Sarah said quietly. Peace agreements fail sometimes. Old hatreds resurface. But you gave them a chance, Dr. Venn replied. That is all anyone can do, his communicator chirped. Another request had come in this time from the Delph species. They had an environmental crisis and wanted to study human responses to similar situations. Then another request arrived. And another. Sarah smiled tiredly. This is going to keep happening, is not it? Every species with a problem will come looking for answers in humanity's mistakes. Yes, Dr. Venn agreed. Is that not what you wanted when you sent the tablets into space? I suppose it is, Sarah said. I just did not realize how exhausting it would be. Over the following months, the archive transformed completely. Human teachers arrived, historians, counselors, conflict resolution specialists. Section 7 expanded to accommodate them. The tablets were displayed more prominently, with human guides to provide context. Species came from across the galaxy. Some sought military lessons. Others wanted to understand economic collapse, environmental recovery, social reform, technological ethics. Every human mistake had become a potential lesson for someone else. Dr. Venn found his role changing too. He was no longer just an archivist cataloging dead civilizations. He was now a teacher, helping living civilizations learn from those who came before. One day, Administrator Kess approached him in the main gallery, the crystalline being pulsed thoughtful blue. I opposed this change, Kess admitted. I thought it was dangerous. Too risky. But I was wrong. What changed your mind? Dr. Venn asked. The Vryn, Kess said simply. They were days away from using biological weapons. Complete devastation. But the human warnings stopped them. How many lives were saved? Millions? Billions? That is the purpose of knowledge, not to sit safely in storage, but to actively prevent suffering. Dr. Venn's antennae twitched with agreement. The tablets were always meant to be used, not just preserved. Sarah joined them, carrying a datapad. I just received a message from Earth. The government wants to send more tablets. Not copies of the old ones, new ones. Lessons from recent history. Mistakes we have made in the last century. They want to keep the collection current. Always growing. An archive that never stops learning, Kess pulsed approvingly. How appropriate. Dr. Venn looked around the vast chamber. Species from a dozen worlds worked together, studying human history, discussing their own challenges, finding solutions through shared knowledge. What do you call this? He asked Sarah. This exchange of hard lessons? This sharing of failures? Sarah thought for a moment. We call it wisdom, not the kind you are born with, but the kind you earn through pain and choose to pass on so others do not have to suffer the same way. She placed her hand near one of the original tablets, the very first one Dr. Venn had ever tried to translate. These warnings were never just about humanity. They were always meant to be universal. Because every intelligent species makes mistakes. The difference between extinction and survival is whether you remember those mistakes and help others avoid them. Dr. Venn understood now. 300 years he had studied these tablets, seeing them as mysterious artifacts. But they were never mysteries. They were gifts. Painful, difficult, uncomfortable gifts, but gifts nonetheless. Thank you, he said to Sarah, for trusting us with your failures, for sharing your shame, for making your mistakes into our lessons. Sarah smiled. That is what warnings are for, Dr. Venn. Not to hide the past, but to light the way toward a better future. Outside the archive, ships from 100 worlds came and went, carrying knowledge in all directions. Human mistakes transformed into galactic wisdom. Failures remembered becoming success-enabled. And in Section 7, the tablets glowed quietly, waiting for the next species to arrive, seeking the lesson they needed to survive their own crucial moment. The warnings had found their purpose at last. 6 months had passed since the Vryn crisis. The Archive of Remembered Lessons, as it was now officially called, had become the busiest research facility in the galaxy. Ships arrived daily, bringing delegations from worlds facing problems their own wisdom could not solve. Dr. Venn walked through the expanded Section 7, observing the activity with satisfaction. His antenna twitched happily as he watched a group of Delph researchers experiencing a tablet about ocean pollution. Nearby, silicon-based Ziv engineers studied human industrial accidents. In the far corner, a delegation from a distant world learned about pandemic responses. Sarah stood at the center of it all, coordinating with the 30 human specialists who had arrived from Earth. She looked tired but content. "Another successful day," Dr. Venn said, approaching her. "Successful and overwhelming," Sarah replied with a small smile. 3 more requests came in this morning. A species dealing with artificial intelligence ethics. Another facing food shortages. And one asking about education reform. "Oh, Lise, can humanity really help with all these problems?" Dr. Venn asked. "Not solve them," Sarah clarified. "But show them what we tried, what failed, and why. That gives them a starting point. They can avoid our mistakes and build better solutions." A young human teacher named Marcus approached them. He looked excited. "Dr. Chen, you need to see this." The Carthon delegation just finished their session. They followed Marcus to a private viewing chamber. Inside, 3 Carthon representatives sat quietly, their insect-like bodies perfectly still. Their compound eyes reflected the fading glow from the tablet they had just experienced. The lead Carthon, named Xzik, spoke through his translator. "We came here seeking information about biological weapons. We thought we needed them to protect our territory from expansion by the Zellan species." "And now?" Sarah asked gently. "Now we understand why that would be a terrible mistake," Xzik said slowly. "The tablet showed us the human experience with such weapons. Not just the immediate effects, but the long-term consequences. Ecosystems destroyed. Innocent populations suffering. And worst of all, the weapons eventually being used against those who created them." Another Carthon, Vzak, added, "We also learned something unexpected. The tablet showed how humans resolved territorial disputes without weapons. Through shared resource agreements, through joint development zones, through understanding that space is vast enough for multiple species. Will you apply these lessons?" Dr. Venn asked hopefully. "We will present them to our council," Xzik confirmed. "We cannot guarantee they will listen, but at least now we have alternatives to offer instead of just weapons." After the Carthon delegation left, Sarah turned to Dr. Venn. "This is what I hoped for. Not forcing anyone to change, but giving them options they had not considered." "It is working better than anyone expected," Dr. Venn agreed. "Even Ambassador Kree has stopped complaining." As if summoned by his name, Kree appeared in the corridor. His black feathers were smooth, a sign of calm among his species. "Dr. Venn, Dr. Chen," he said formally, "I owe you both an apology. I opposed this project from the beginning. I called it dangerous and reckless. But I was wrong." Sarah looked surprised. "Ambassador Kree, you do not need to apologize. Your concerns were legitimate. Perhaps," Kree acknowledged. "But I let fear control my judgment. I have been watching the results over these months. The Vryn ceasefire is holding. The Carthons are reconsidering their military plans. 7 other species have avoided conflicts by studying human mistakes first. This is not dangerous, this is invaluable." He paused, his feathers ruffling slightly with emotion. "And I learned something personal as well. I asked to see tablets about government secrecy, about what happens when leaders hide information from their people. It reminded me of my own species' history, the period we do not talk about. The accidents we covered up. I realized we never truly learned from those mistakes because we tried to forget them instead of remember them." "What will you do?" Dr. Venn asked. "I will recommend that the Corvid government create their own collection," Kree said. "Our own warnings. Our own lessons preserved. So our children do not repeat our errors." After Kree left, Sarah sat down on a bench, looking thoughtful. "That is the real power of this place. Not just teaching others about human mistakes, but inspiring them to be honest about their own." Dr. Venn settled beside her, his legs folding carefully. "I have been thinking about something. You said, Humanity sent these tablets into space during your darkest period, when you thought you might not survive. But you did survive. Why did you not retrieve the tablets? Sarah was quiet for a moment. Because we realized they served a greater purpose out here than they would back home. On Earth, we already learned these lessons. We already changed our behavior. But the galaxy had not learned them yet. Leaving the tablets in space gave them a chance to help others the way they helped us. That is very generous, Dr. Venn observed. Most species would keep such knowledge for themselves. Use it as an advantage. We thought about that, Sarah admitted. Some people on Earth argued exactly that point. They said our mistakes gave us wisdom, and wisdom should be kept as our unique strength. But others argued that watching the galaxy repeat our mistakes when we could prevent it would be its own kind of failure. A moral failure. And that argument won. She looked at the tablets surrounding them. These represent the worst moments of human history. Our shame. Our suffering. Our stupidity. But they also represent our hope. Hope that others can learn faster than we did. Hope that the galaxy can be better, because we were brave enough to share our failures. Dr. Venn felt deep respect for this perspective. His own species, the Archons, had always celebrated their achievements while quietly hiding their mistakes. Perhaps that was why they never became a dominant force in the galaxy. They learned slowly, if at all. Administrator Kess approached them, pulsing with urgent yellow. We have a situation. Not a crisis, but something unusual. A ship just arrived. Very old design. The crew claims to be from a human colony. Sarah stood up quickly. A colony? Earth only established 2 colony ships, and they should not arrive at their destinations for another 50 years. This crew says they launched 300 years ago, Kess explained. Before your darkest period. They have been traveling through space all this time, in suspended animation. They just woke up. Sarah and Dr. Venn hurried to the docking bay. The ship was indeed ancient, a cylindrical design with primitive engines. It looked like a relic from another era. The airlock opened, and 6 humans emerged. They wore old-style uniforms and looked around in confusion and wonder. Their leader, a woman with gray hair, stepped forward. I am Captain Rebecca Torres, she said. We left Earth in 2087. We were sent to establish a colony on a distant world. Our ship's computer woke us early because it detected this station. What year is it? What happened to Earth? Sarah introduced herself and gently explained that more than 3 centuries had passed. She told them about the crisis Earth faced after they left. About the warnings sent into space. About humanity's survival and eventual journey to the stars. Captain Torres listened with tears in her eyes. We left to save humanity by starting fresh elsewhere. We thought Earth might die, but Earth survived. Our families survived. Your family's descendants survived, Sarah corrected gently. And they thrived. Earth is peaceful now. Unified. We have learned from our mistakes. And these? Torres gestured at the tablets visible through the corridor. These are the warnings you mentioned? Yes. Sarah confirmed. Every major mistake humanity made. Preserved so we would never forget. And now we share them with other species. To help them avoid similar problems. Torres walked slowly to the nearest tablet. She read the symbol's ancient Sumerian text describing a terrible flood. We learned about this in school, the Epic of Gilgamesh, a warning about hubris. You recognize it? Dr. Venn asked in surprise. Of course, Torres said. Even in our time, we studied these lessons. They were part of every child's education. The idea was that if we sent colonies to new worlds, those colonists would remember humanity's mistakes and not repeat them. She turned to her crew. We spent 300 years in suspended sleep, believing we were humanity's last hope. But humanity did not need us to survive. They survived by remembering, by learning, by changing. One of her crew members, a young man, asked, What do we do now? Our mission was to start a new colony. But if Earth is safe and thriving, do we still need to? Sarah smiled. That is your choice. You could return to Earth, or you could still establish your colony, but now as explorers and builders, not as refugees. Or you could stay here and help us teach these lessons to the galaxy. We need more humans who understand the history behind the warnings. Torres thought carefully. My crew and I will need time to decide, but I would like to see all the tablets first. I want to understand everything that happened while we were asleep. I want to know what humanity became. Over the next week, Captain Torres and her crew experienced tablet after tablet. They witnessed the climate crisis that nearly destroyed Earth, the pandemic that killed millions, the political collapse that almost led to nuclear war, and they saw how humanity responded not perfectly, but persistently. How each generation learned from the previous one. How mistakes became lessons, and lessons became wisdom. On the final day, Torres met with Sarah and Dr. Venn in a quiet observation room overlooking the archive. We have made our decision, Torres announced. 3 of my crew want to return to Earth. They have descendants there they wish to meet, but the other 3, including myself, want to stay here. We want to be part of this mission. Teaching the galaxy? Sarah asked. More than that, Torres said. I want to add to the collection. Our colony ship experienced problems during the journey. Equipment failures, medical emergencies, social conflicts in the early years before we entered suspended sleep. We made mistakes of our own. Small scale compared to Earth's history, but valuable nonetheless. The lessons of survival in isolation, of maintaining hope during impossible circumstances, of working together when there is no other choice. Dr. Venn's antennae perked up with interest. You would share your colony's private struggles? If it helps others, yes, Torres said firmly. That is what these tablets represent, is it not? The courage to share our failures publicly, to transform shame into strength. My crew and I learned that lesson long ago, even before we left Earth. It is time we contributed to it. Sarah felt emotion welling up. Captain Torres, you represent the best of humanity. The generation that sent both colony ships and warning tablets into space. You believed in both survival and sharing. Thank you. 3 months later, Section 7 gained a new subsection. It was smaller than the main collection, but equally important. It contained testimonies from Captain Torres's crew, holographic recordings of their experiences during the colony voyage, their struggles with limited resources, their conflicts and resolutions, their moments of despair and triumph. Dr. Venn noticed something beautiful happening. The new testimonies attracted different species than the main collection did. Small communities facing isolation came to learn from Torres's crew. Families dealing with multi-generational journeys sought their advice. Groups struggling to maintain unity in difficult circumstances found hope in their stories. One evening, Dr. Venn found Sarah standing alone in the main gallery, looking at the original tablet, the one from Mesopotamia that had started everything. Are you well? He asked. I am thinking about my great-great-grandmother, Sarah said quietly. The soldier, whose story I told the Vryn. She died never knowing if her suffering meant anything, never knowing if her warnings would help anyone. But now, because of what we built here, her story helped prevent a war. Her pain had purpose. She turned to Dr. Venn. That is true for all of these. Every human who suffered, who made mistakes, who learned painful lessons, they did not suffer for nothing. Their experiences are saving lives now. Preventing wars, stopping disasters. That gives meaning to even our worst moments. Dr. Venn understood. The tablets were not just educational tools. They were memorials. Ways of honoring those who suffered by ensuring their suffering taught valuable lessons. Humanity has given the galaxy a precious gift, Dr. Venn said. Not technology, not weapons, not power, but something more valuable. The wisdom that comes from surviving your own mistakes. Sarah nodded. And the courage to share that wisdom freely, even when it reveals our weaknesses. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching as delegates from a dozen species studied the tablets, learned the lessons, and prepared to carry that knowledge back to their own worlds. The warnings that humanity sent into space during their darkest hour had become the galaxy's greatest hope, not because they promised easy answers, but because they offered something more important: the truth about the cost of failure and the path toward avoiding it. In the quiet of the archive, surrounded by 10,000 lessons carved in stone and metal and ceramic, two beings from different worlds understood the same truth. The bravest thing any civilization can do is remember its failures, learn from them, and share those lessons so others never have to suffer the same way. The legacy of human warnings had become the foundation of galactic wisdom, and the tablets glowed softly in the darkness, waiting for the next species to arrive, seeking the lesson that might save their world. The end.